just wanna be free with my people to prosper and hold it down. Don't you sit and wait, contemplating on a revolution. The time is now. I just wanna be free. 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 Can't you see? I just wanna.
Okay. Another episode of the Things I Wish I Knew About Money podcast. I'm your host, Camille Smith, and I have a lovely guest with me. There's actually a funny story with this. So yesterday, just yesterday, we managed to meet each other, thanks to Dr. Vibes. So I know Dr. Vibes
Yeah,
is
shout out to Dr.
watching.
Vibes.
And Colin, I think we were having a great discussion because we went to a podcast launching. I was gonna say relaunch, a podcast launch, and I was able to meet amazing people that like are content creators, have been in the game for like decades and stuff. And I feel like a newbie still. I think I was like the only one.
Yeah, you're not alone. You're not alone.
Oh, stop it. You're being modest. So I was and then we had an amazing conversation. I was like, hey, do you want to come on? And you're like, when? I was like, today.
Yeah.
So Colin, welcome. Thank you so much for helping me or letting me twist your arm to come on and to
Okay.
share some knowledge. And who is Colin?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. And
No problem.
indeed, shout out to Dr. Vibe because it was a really interesting evening last night. I enjoyed it immensely. And glad to be here. So who is Colin Jobe? Very simple question. That's a question, interesting question. Father of two girls, former podcaster, former broadcaster, all that good stuff, and stepped away from that world for many, many years, and is now trying to re-enter that world. And I'm also while I've been away for a little bit, I've been a student of history, general history, Black history, politics, and how it all relates to people of African descent. Just not just locally but globally, and how it affects us, and the psychology behind it, all that kind of interesting stuff. People might find it boring or weird, but I find it interesting. So
it's okay to know a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah. I try to keep abreast of what's going on.
And sometimes that is very difficult, I find.
Understand.
That's why I love bringing on folks that have more expertise on different things. And we were definitely talking about that yesterday. And you literally brought it to my attention. I was like, wait a minute. You know about BRICS?
Yeah. I think it's a fascinating and phenomenal development.
Yeah.
And it's something that it's potentially could change what I call the financial flow of the world. Right. And you're not hearing a lot about it. And in my opinion, that's by design. And but you're going to. And this time it's going to be different. And first of all, for people who don't know what BRICS stands for, BRICS is an acronym for it's an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Yes.
And
that is the most important thing to
right. And basically what the whole plan behind BRICS is, those 5 countries are coming together.
Yeah.
Is they want to wane themselves off of the US dollar. Right. So, which is an interesting development. I mean, think about it from your perspective, from your personal perspective. Like when you travel, And I had this experience a few months ago when I went down to the US.
Yeah.
I take Canadian dollars, I
Yes.
buy US dollars, so
Mhm.
I automatically lose money right there, right? And then I go to the US and I spend those dollars, right?
Mhm.
So in some ways, you could argue that I'm losing twice, right? Now,
We're
that's
always
on
losing.
a micro scale, right? That's on a
Yeah.
micro scale. It's a very small scale. But imagine doing that from a country's perspective. And you're doing that for millions of people, right? So you're trading around the world, right? So I'm
Yeah.
trading, Russia's trading with China or whoever, and they're all taking their currency, they're buying US dollars,
Mhm.
and then they're trading on another country, right? So think about it from a country's perspective. Like I just give you the example of my own personal perspective, and I knew I lost money, right? Because
Yeah.
it wasn't dollar for dollar. If it's dollar for dollar, you're not losing money. If the other dollar is higher than your dollar, you're automatically losing money, right? And so, right. So imagine if you're doing this in terms of billions, right? So, right. So you could argue that it's a lose-lose situation, right? So countries are saying, look, why are we doing this,
Mhm.
right? And why don't we just trade in our own currency
Yeah.
or form a block and create our own currency, right? And
Golly. Okay.
bypass the US currency, right? And here's the thing. This is not a new idea.
I remember you mentioning that.
It's not a new idea. It's minimum 40 years old, probably more like 100 years old, right? Because like I said, if countries, why would I trade with you? You basically have one country that's
Yeah.
getting a commission out of everybody's transactions,
Yes.
right? All
True.
over the world. So we got like 200 countries in the world. One country, because they established themselves as a dominant force, militarily as well as economically. And the military part is important because they go hand in hand with the economic part, right? Right? People may or may not realize it, but it's not an accident that they have 700 bases around the world. It's not an accident, right? You step out of
Agree.
line, you show us your
Boom.
hand. If we don't
Yep.
like your hand, you might get a backhand, right? So, right? So,
Yes.
so it's yeah. Are we into bullying? Yeah, we're into bullying, right?
That
Right? So,
I've heard that many times that
right,
they are the big bullies in
right.
the
So it's not a
world.
coincidence. It's not a
Mhm.
coincidence that like I said, they have military bases around the world,
Yes.
and the promotion is freedom and democracy, but it's really economics and freedom for them, right? Right,
Yes.
right.
And because I want to go back, because I'm pretty sure there are different folks that understand, like, okay, so why these countries in particular? Because when you go to, because I know you're from Guyana, if you go to Jamaica or you go to Korea and stuff, there's different currencies,
Right,
and they're like, I always feel like I lose out anytime.
right, right.
So it's the same fact that these other countries felt that they were really losing when it came to American dollars. So it's very interesting that they all formed together. Do you know what? Because I know you've been doing the research and stuff.
Well,
That's why. Sorry.
I mean,
Mhm.
Russia's been an adversary of the U.S. for years, right? And I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing. I think
Okay.
there's pros and cons to every side, right?
Agree.
Uh, India and China. China has developed significantly in the last 50 years. Like they've gone from people. We can mock them all we want. We can talk negatively about it. This is a juggernaut that you're gonna have to deal with. So you better
Yeah.
learn to deal with them. Like them or
Yeah.
dislike them, it's irrelevant. Put your emotions aside. The train's has left the station and it's coming at you, right? So
Golly.
you could debate it how you want. You're not
Mhm.
getting around it, right? And what they've done is they've gone from a poor country to a rich
Mm.
country in 2
Mhm.
generations, which is phenomenal and not supposed to happen, right?
China, right?
Sorry? Yeah,
I
China,
mean China. Okay.
right?
And
But
I could see why, because
right? Well,
there's other
well,
places like that as well.
right, but they're the big player, right? And they're potentially going to be the biggest player in the world in this regard, and economically, right? Because and the irony is you got to thank America, right? Because American companies went over there and invested heavily, and what's happened now is China basically learned their game and is beating them at their game, and they're ticked, right?
Yes.
So, right, so you gotta the student taught the teacher, and the student is now on the verge of surpassing the teacher, and the student has lots and lots of friends, more than the teacher's friends, and the student is willing to train tons of friends. So you got, like, when you throw numbers, it's one thing to throw economic numbers. When you can match those economic numbers with human numbers,
Yeah.
you got something, right? And they can do that, right? So you have China, India, all these guys. So a lot of, like, Russia, like I said, has had problem. Well, there's been adversary of the US for years, like their enemy, basically, right? So, and so all these guys coming together are looking and saying, look, if we do this together as a team, we could do really, really well,
Yes.
right? And we could save ourselves a bunch of money, and we could make money in the process.
True.
So it makes perfect sense, right? Like,
Indeed.
I mean, here's the history of money from my understanding of it. Is in the past, it was linked to gold, right?
Yes. Yes.
And in the 70s, the US decided, no, we don't want to do that. We're going to link it to oil, right? So they linked it up to Saudi Arabia, right? And take note of what I just said, Saudi Arabia. We're going to get to that in a minute, right? And so they shifted, and so in other words, they didn't have to back it up by gold. So for example, if you made $1 in the past, you backed it up by gold. When you shifted from the gold standard, you basically can just print money without really backing it up, right?
Yes.
So, and that's what they've done. And that's what and then they shifted that money into military and different things. And here we are, we're jockeying the world, and the world's basically responding to whatever your demands are, right? So the world is saying, look, we're no longer interested in doing that. And people have tried this, like individual countries have tried this. It's been tried in Africa, like France. A lot of African countries have thought of this. This is not new.
Okay.
Right? Muammar Gaddafi thought about this too. Right? There's a reason why he's dead. He's dead because he thought about something like this. He didn't just die like that, right?
Yeah.
Right?
There's a lot of politics in this.
Politics and money and all these things they're married. Okay. If people think they're not married, they're naive, right? Right? They're married to each other, right? You don't get one without the other, right? Politics, money, power, these things that's just how it works, right? And so, for example, like I said, if you go back and look at someone like, say, Gaddafi, right? Gaddafi took Libya, and people will argue that he was a dictator and this, that, and the other. Okay, I don't really worry about those kind of titles. It all depends on who's talking about them, right?
Yeah.
And what their interests are, right? If you don't like me and you're concerned about me, you will not paint a positive picture of me. That's just not how people are, right?
That is very true.
Right. So if you go back and look at his history, he was a phenomenal, contrary to popular opinion, he was a phenomenal leader, right?
Okay.
He took a country, for example, he took a country where 15% of the population could read. When he was killed, 85% could read. I don't know. I call that progress.
Say it again. So 50%?
15%, 50 and 1.5 could read. Most people were illiterate, right?
Okay.
When he died, most people were literate, right? Right.
I mean, the proof is in the pudding, right?
There you go. I'm just giving you one example, right?
Yes.
He took desert and turned them into farmland, right? From oil money, right? They had oil, and he built up his economy. Libya was debt free, right? He had a surplus. Most countries have a deficit. He had a surplus, right? And basically, he called a meeting. In my opinion, he made a couple of errors, right? When you're going to do something like BRICS, the idea is great. I agree with the idea. I understand the idea, right? But you need a couple of things. You
Which
need
is?
you need a really good army, right?
Okay.
Right. And I hate to say this,
Mm.
you need weapons, right?
Oh
Strong
gosh.
weapons,
Oh gosh.
right? Right.
Yes.
And nuclear weapons, right? I'm just gonna say it, nuclear weapons, right? Because when you have people talk about nuclear weapons, when you have nuclear weapons, nobody invades you. They may not like you, they don't invade you.
And you're right, because that's been the whole issue for a good while.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, okay,
I agree.
for example, and people may think I'm crazy when I say that. Right now, there's a conflict in Ukraine and Russia, right?
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
Okay,
Yes. We all know that.
right? Here's
Yes.
the deal. In the past, Russia used to store their nukes when Russia was Ukraine was part of Russia. Russia stored their nukes in the Ukraine, right? Part of the deal of Ukraine's freedom was they had to give up those nukes, right? If they kept those nukes, guess what? There's no war, right? Nobody invades a
Okay.
country with nukes,
Oh.
right? There's no
Okay.
war because nobody
Okay.
invades unless to my knowledge, nobody with nuclear weapons has been invaded, right?
Mm,
Right? So,
true.
right? So we can like it, dislike it. They tend to force everyone to back things up, right?
Yes.
If you don't back it up, we'll blow you up. Okay, right? And people tend to back off when they hear stuff like that, right?
Because they're
Right?
concerned.
Well, they know what can happen, right? Like, for
Yeah.
example, all of the other countries now are supposedly sending arms to Ukraine, right? They're not
Yes.
going there. They're not going there. If they're so in love with Ukraine, go there. Go there and fight Russia head on. They're not going to go, right? So, right, they're just not, because Russia has nukes, right? So they're not going to go, right? So anyway, right? So like Gaddafi, I'll give you an example. Like I said, coming back to Gaddafi, Gaddafi had this plan to develop Africa, right?
Yes.
And he basically called a meeting and told the African countries, look, you guys are all trading in US and euros. Everything you do is in euros, right?
Yeah.
So, I know you're losing money. You know you're losing money. I got a way to show you how to not lose money, right? And they're like, okay. So he says, okay, here's the deal. And I could relate to this, whatever he said, on a cultural level, okay? He said to them, look, most of these countries in Africa are poor, but they have gold, right? Most of them have like ridiculous quantities of gold, right?
Yes.
And Gaddafi's proposal was, look, why don't you trade in gold, right? So you say, okay, I'm a poor country, but I got gold. So you get your gold and you go to the rich countries and say, okay, I want to buy this, this, and this, okay? And you say to them, look, okay, they say to you, okay, give us our euros or give us our US dollars. And you say, no, I'll give you gold instead.
Yeah.
Right? Those countries, most of the rich countries in the world, the G7, which is the richest countries in the world, they don't have large quantities of gold. So if you show up with gold, you have an advantage over them, even though you're maybe poor. Right? So if you trade with them over a period of time, you will win the vast majority of the time.
And question, who are the G7? I mean, I could do the research,
but
I want to.
You're basically looking at the US, Japan, France, Italy, England, right? Western European countries. Those are the most powerful economic countries in the world, right? Right. So they dominate the international banking community, right? Led by the UN, by the US. The US controls the World Bank. They control the IMF, right? They control the UN, right?
Golly.
Right? People argue they even control the African Development Bank, which is stupid and silly on the African parts, right? Right? If I'm going to have my own development bank, I'm not going to have someone else control it, because they're going to dictate to me whatever the terms are, and I'm going to have to just go along, right?
Yes.
Right. So anyway, so what I'm saying, so for example, when Gaddafi proposed this idea, he actually had a meeting with the African leaders and said, look, you guys don't really have to be poor. I know you're poor right now. You don't really have to be poor. I found an asset that you have that the guys you're going up against don't have. And if you can figure out how to use this asset, you can actually flip the game on its head in a fairly short period of time. And and I'll tell you, I'll tell you from a cultural perspective,
Yes.
I'm Guyanese, right? Guyana
Mm-hmm.
is full of gold, even right now,
Yeah.
full of gold, right? If I'm running Guyana and someone came to me and said, look, I would like to trade with Guyana in gold, I would say, we won't do this tomorrow. We'll do this tonight. Because I could do this tonight, like literally do it, right?
Chest
Right?
high.
Like,
Chest high.
like, and I'm not making this up. This is
Yeah.
possible, right?
Mhm.
Like, and these countries have that. It's one of the assets that the poor countries have, the African countries in particular, over the rich countries.
Yeah.
But their economies have been dictated by the West for years. Like, for example, in Africa, there's like 15 francophone countries, right? And
Yeah.
those countries
Hearing
have to
about
put their
that.
reserves in France. If these are independent countries, why are they putting their money in another country? That doesn't make sense. But when leaders have come up in those countries and say this is a bad idea,
Yeah.
they've been killed. France has killed a minimum of 15 leaders because of this, right? It's not just me saying it. There's evidence to support that.
It's on Google, so they can't
Right.
come after us.
There's evidence to support this, right? And
Exactly.
some of the guys, they've hired like best friends of the leader, other leaders, and had him kill his friend to maintain this policy, right? So this is not right. So this
It's not child's play.
This is not child's play. Like we're talking. I mean, we talk about the cartel in Colombia and Mexico.
Yeah.
Those guys are tough. These guys are tougher. Right? The international banking community is no joke. Right? Like I always say, look, you know what? If you said to me, deal with the cartel or these guys, I personally, I wouldn't be happy. I wouldn't have a problem with dealing with El Chapo or these guys. They're easy to deal with. I know what they're like. The other guys will pretend to be nice, but they're actually meaner. And they're more dangerous. And they undermine your economy, right? So if you look at history, what I'm saying is a product of history, right? Yeah. It's happened time and time again. So anyway, when Gaddafi proposed this to the countries, and he could actually show them, he had like a blueprint to show them how to do it. Because guess what? He had done it, right? And he had stockpiled gold. So he could literally show them how they could do it. When the West got wind of that, it was like, this can't happen, right? So we're gonna bite off the head of the snake, and he's the snake.
Shucks.
Right?
Yeah.
So you put together a PR campaign against him, and you wipe him out. It's not a coincidence that he died. He had to, based on because look, if he's allowed to run free, we can't control the financial system. And bankers run the world. Bankers run the world. People don't realize that, but they do. Yeah. Most banks are not even they're private banks. A lot of the big banks in the world are not run by governments. They're run by private banks. So they tell the governments what to do. Right.
So question, because if that's the case, with the banks controlling the government, are you kind of saying, well, we also know that without the banks, that is the reason why sometimes the stock market goes haywire.
Well, it's not because of them. Well, I mean,
not because of them.
Sometimes, sometimes they benefit from it. They study it, so they adjust.
Okay.
Right?
Because I'm just trying to get the understanding of that, because when we first heard about BRICS, and I know this is like late, but it keeps developing every week, right? So like whenever we hear about BRICS, the obviously American economy gets affected, but how does that affect? I guess there's two questions. How does it affect the stock market, and how does it affect Canada? Because I mean, as Canadians,
the second question is the easier question to answer, right? I'll get to the first one in a minute, right? Because you have to remember, Canada and the US are linked, right?
Yeah, we're cousins.
They're not just cousins, they're married, right? So right, they're married, right? And you know the old saying, if the US sneezes, Canada catches a cold, right? So right. So it's true. I think it's true because everything is linked, right? So so eventually, here's the thing: BRICS hasn't affected the financial system yet, right? But it has the potential to alter the financial system as we know it, right? And so it does. So far, it hasn't. There's no evidence of it affecting the stock market, right? I think in the future, it potentially could affect the money markets, right? Because like these countries are saying right now that they're thinking of trading with each other in their own currency. So they're saying, look, I'll just give you my currency, and I'll give you. So we'll trade there, and then eventually, what we're going to do, we want to create our own currency, right? So there's two things happening right there, right? Like either when you do that, you're avoiding the U.S. currency once. If you do that, either plan you're avoiding the U.S. currency. So like, remember, like I said, the U.S. gets a cut of every transaction. When you do that, there's no cut.
Yeah.
Right.
Not saying is a good thing, but like
there's no cut. Right. Right. But so they're basically taking the same plan Gaddafi has and actually making it bigger, because like those four countries represent 40% of the world's population. That's almost half of the world's population, right? With, like I said, a lot of people, a lot of armies, big armies, right? You got India as the most populous country in the world, 1.4 billion people, right? And growing, right? China is like 1.2 or 1.3, something like that, right? And so right there, you have a significant portion of the world's population. You throw in Brazil, you're probably looking at another 200 million, right? South Africa, probably another 50 million. So we're talking lots of people, right?
Yeah.
Lots of people. And like I said, India and China has nukes, right? Right.
And we don't want to mess with individuals that have it.
Right, right. So the plan could work because, like, if the bankers try to retaliate, the other guys have nukes, right?
True.
Right. So
I'm gonna pause for 1 second because it seems like Dr. Vibe is in the building. So hello, Dr. Vibe. But continue.
What's going on, Dr. Vibe? What's going on? Right. But that's to me, that's the most important development. If you have, I hate to say it, and I know it sounds horrible, but like, we all need a defense mechanism, right? Like you wouldn't go to bed tonight and keep your door open, right? Right, regardless of how safe you think your neighborhood is, right?
So, I have my bat too, just in case.
Right. So, right. And if you're down south, if you're gonna do that, you definitely have your AK-47 hanging out, right? Hanging by somewhere in the neighborhood, right? So it's the same sort of thing, right? Like countries they function in basically the same way, right? Just on a grander scale, right? And so this development, I think, you got 5, and these countries are growing. So these populations aren't getting smaller. Like in Europe, the populations are getting smaller. They're not producing as fast, right?
Yes.
It's just not just me saying it. This demographic data that, right? All those countries, like Italy and all these countries, are promoting immigration because their population is dying off and their population isn't growing rapidly, right? They're not producing enough people, right? So they have to bring in immigrants, right? But China and India, they don't have that problem, right?
They don't.
Right? South Africa doesn't have that problem, right? Africa in general, Africa is the youngest continent. The average person is like 18, right? So there's a potential Africa to overrun India and China in the future in terms of numbers, right? Some of these countries are really, the people in these countries are young. So they're gonna, as long as they're producing children, then those populations are gonna grow, right?
True.
So these countries, so you come back, let's come back to BRICS now. So these guys are saying, look, let's trade amongst ourselves. Let's create a block. And let's look at creating our own currency and our own banking system and bypass the other guys. So we don't have to worry about the World Bank. We don't have to worry about the IMF, right? The big players, we can slap them if we want to, right? Seriously, they can get our backhand. We're accustomed to getting their backhand. We can give them the backhand, right? I have no qualms with that. First of all, competition is good. Why should one guy dictate the whole game for everyone else, right?
Okay.
And these countries, they have to grow. So why would, if you have a chance to grow on your own terms or somebody else's terms, always choose your own terms, right?
Absolutely.
Right?
So I guess, okay, so now, so we have China, India, that are like the two biggest continents. Continents? Oh,
Countries.
countries.
Yeah, countries.
Countries.
Yeah,
Countries, everyone. I said,
That's
I
okay.
meant countries. And then we have
Brazil.
South Africa and Brazil. And Brazil's like,
Brazil's
I'm
pretty
thinking
big.
of the map, and I'm like, this is actually insane that like the way that it's surrounding North America is pretty wild. And how does it benefit the other countries around those countries? Like, so example, in Africa, how does the countries in Africa benefit from BRICS?
Well, they're saying, look, they're going to look at it and see, how does South Africa benefit? And if South Africa benefits, like South Africa is potentially the most developed country in the continent, the best infrastructure, right?
Okay,
I mean,
big up
those
to South
races had a phenomenal infrastructure, even though they were racist, right? The challenge South Africa's having is, how do we get the masses in the game, right? So if we're going to trade, and we can actually find a way to bring in the masses and get them up and running, right? And right now, like, so those are 5 countries. The reality is there are 30 other countries that are looking at it and want to join BRICS.
You're right. I think I did hear that. Oh,
right? And which tells me that there's probably another 50 that would like to join as well, right? I'm just guessing, but they're all watching, right?
Yeah.
To see how it plays out, right? Because South Africa is going to be the engine for Africa. So if South Africa goes well, there's 53 other potential countries that would want in, right?
Golly,
right?
that
right. I'm just saying. This is just. You can debate it all you want.
No,
right?
no debate.
We already know 30 countries, other countries, have expressed an interest of joining, so they see the benefits, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is a fact. Like, there's 30 other countries that, right, and we know other countries are watching. They're scared.
Everyone's watching.
They're scared because they don't want to show their hand right now. Other countries don't have a problem showing their hand, right? And here's an interesting development. Remember, we talked about Saudi Arabia before?
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
Saudi Arabia, like I said, the dollar in the 70s was shifted to the petrodollar. So they basically, in other words, what they did is they went along with the US.
Yes.
The match of the dollar. The US used the dollar versus the oil revenues.
Yes.
Right? It's an economic part of their economic engine. Saudi wants to join BRICS. Right? So right? So they're stepping away from their longtime ally and saying, look, hey, there's something in this for us too. And we can actually benefit, because look, if we sell to China and Russia, we have new markets, right? We have new markets that are bigger than the markets that we're serving right now. So we need to look at it, right? And if you look at the developments that have been going on there, like they have a lot of money, like billions, right? And they've been investing their money all over the world, even in like in soccer teams and all this kind of stuff, right? These guys, this new leader they have, he's a young guy, but he's no idiot, right?
He knows.
He's pretty savvy.
Stuff. Yeah,
pretty savvy guy, right? So he's almost like, in a way, he's almost like he's backstabbing the US, right? He's
giving them bun,
right? He's giving them, let's in street terms, you could say he's giving them the finger, and he's not telling them that they're number one, right? So you understand what I'm getting at, right? And he too's got a lot of arms, and he's got a lot of money, right? And he's stepping away, right?
God, because this is interesting, because if there's 30 countries that are thinking like Loki, like, oh, I might go to BRICS still, and then Saudi Arabia, this is history in the making, no?
Precisely. That's what I'm saying. Like, we're seeing the financial system potentially being altered right before our eyes, right? Like, this is no joke. Like, this is the equivalent of, like, people talk about the Berlin Wall coming down, all this kind of stuff. This is bigger. This is, in my opinion, it's potentially bigger than the invention of the internet. Okay, like, Seriously,
Golly. So
right? It sounds outrageous, but is it really? I don't know. Time will
mhm,
tell, right?
time will tell. And everything's developing very quickly as of late.
Yeah, and
Like
you got
even though you said it's been in the mix for like 40 to 100 years, but it actually us seeing it
oh yeah, because like I said, BRICS in 2009 is when they actually came up with the idea of talking about BRICS. But other
mhm,
countries have tried to do this on their own, right?
but that failed.
Right. And like I
Failedish.
said, like in Africa, guys have died over this, right? This idea,
Mm,
right? Like Gaddafi died over this idea. This is not so. And other countries, because other countries are saying, look, why am I paying all this money to another country, right? And like France is basically, when France left those countries that they had colonized, they basically went to them, put a gun to their head and said, look, we want to control your economy,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And
Still in
some
debt.
guys, sometimes when the people resist, when the leaders resisted, they pull the trigger, right? Like, this is not this is not what I'm saying.
Oh, I
This
know, I know.
happens,
Yeah.
right? Right. It's just so we don't hear about it. And we think, oh, these other countries are just functioning strictly by the book. Well, depends on what kind of book you're talking about, right? Right.
Mhm.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Because the colonial
So
powers don't like to give up power.
correct. That is very true. And we've seen that hand in hand. I guess my question is how, because obviously we said that Canada is married to the
Yeah.
States. So how do, or I guess how does the regular folks become prepared for this, or how do we like, because like let's it will make sense when I go. So we've been trying to adapt to the internet since 2020. We were trying to adapt to AI, which
I
whatever's
understand. I
happening since,
understand.
and all this stuff. So how are we able to adapt to BRICS that is coming in
Well,
around?
we're gonna see how it plays out. We haven't seen how it plays
We
out.
have to see how it plays out first.
Right
Okay.
now they're in talks, right? But the
So we have to
talks are
have our popcorn.
serious. Right. They're in talks, but the talks are serious. They're getting serious and they're getting heated up. Right.
Oh,
And
I have a
and
question for you.
yeah.
Dr. Vibe asked, um, who do you trust more, China or USA?
That's a no-brainer. Here's the thing. Here's my thing. Here's the thing,
Mhm.
right? Um,
Great questions.
as a black person,
Hmm.
uh, black people have no friends. Right? Right. Right. Okay. So, right.
That it?
However, that being said,
However.
if you're running a country, you've got to associate with someone, right?
Yes.
And why China is winning so far is because their terms for their financial agreements with these countries is better than the US. And they're not
Mm,
meddling in the politics of the country. So, for example, they're going to a country and saying, look, the US is saying, look, here's the terms, right? You want to build a bridge, here are the terms.
yeah.
We're charging you 6%. China's coming in
Yes.
saying, okay, you want to build that bridge? We'll charge you 4%. So countries are looking at this, okay, oh, whoa, if you give me 4%, the other guy's giving me 6%, I'm saving X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
Right?
No brainer.
Yeah. So boom, right? Right. I mean, but like I said, the US meddles in the politics, right? Like if your leaders don't align with what they say,
Yeah.
you
Then
know,
they
you
twist their
wonder why
hand, they twist their arm and
well,
stuff.
they don't twist their arm. The guy's hand ends up out of a socket sooner or later, right? So right.
Why do we have
And,
to say that?
right. I mean, you wonder why the presidential helicopter crashed. I wonder how that happened, right? And right, and it's not, once again, it's not just me saying it. There's actually a guy wrote a book about it called Confessions of an Economic Hitman, right? So if you read that book, and there's videos on it on YouTube and stuff like that.
Yeah. So it's not just us.
I'm not making stuff up,
It's I
right?
just don't want anything to happen.
I understand. No. I'm just saying. I'm just saying,
Mhm.
right? And if you understand how those countries work, right? So that's why
Yeah.
the rest of the world is lining up with China. It's because China has better terms. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they wouldn't do the same thing, right? Like at the end of the day, who pays the piper calls the shots, right?
Fair enough.
So, right, like there's no, I think what people need to understand is there's no charity in the world. right? If people are proposing to help you, there's something in it for them. You have to understand that, right? And unfortunately, as Black people, we tend to think, oh, people are coming and they're doing this because they like us. No, they don't, right? You've got
There's always
resources.
something.
They need resources. That's why they're at your doorstep, not because they think
Yeah.
you're wonderful, like, right? Right?
So then, okay, because let's go back to, so now I want to kind of dabble into the Caribbean, but you're probably going to say the same answer. So Guyana has gold. They are able to manage that type of resources. What
Yeah,
about
we've
the
got.
other Caribbeans? Like,
Well,
what if?
the Caribbean, I'll be blunt about the Caribbean region.
Oh, shucks.
The Caribbean region is, and quite frankly, is a disappointment. It's a backward region right now. It's backward.
Yeah.
They're lost. Most of the leaders in the Caribbean are a complete. It's like a collection of educated fools, right? Right? Seriously, they're a bunch of idiots, right? They're not serious. They're not serious. These are not serious players, right?
Okay.
They're waiting
Just
for somebody to
got
fall out of the sky and bail them out. They're not serious, right?
Yeah.
Right? I hate to say it, but just look at how a lot of them, the leaders in these countries, look at their societies, right? That tells you, right? Like a lot of African countries are significantly more progressive than the Caribbean. Like
Is that
Rwanda,
because?
they're growing like crazy. These countries are growing. Like Guyana has that potential. Guyana has the
Yeah.
potential to bail out the whole English-speaking Caribbean, right?
Damn. Now I'm glad I asked you that question, because now I'm fascinated. Like, and I hope, like, because we are globally known and stuff, but I hope
Yeah.
there's a way for someone to hear this, like, from the Caribbean. I'm not gonna say which Caribbean.
Yeah,
because
and
I don't
I'm
want
not
to.
knocking.
Yeah, I don't want to
I'm just
knock
saying. I'm just
any.
telling you what the
Yeah.
situation is. I'm just saying what it is, right?
How can they learn from? Sorry, you said Rwanda.
Like
How can they?
Rwanda's.
Yeah, how can
They're
they learn from them?
they should. I mean, they could just watch what they do. Like, for example,
Yeah.
in Rwanda had a genocide 25 years ago, right?
Yes, I remember.
Fairly phenomenal turnaround, right? In this country,
Mhm.
this is a country that in 25 years from a genocide, right?
Yeah.
They, for example, blood supplies, for example, right? They've embraced science and technology, right? So they're using like drones to deliver blood supply. You show me any Caribbean countries doing that,
Oh.
right? Right.
Blood?
So blood. I'm not making this up. This is right. And it's
Yeah.
a very advanced country. Go on the internet, go on to YouTube and look up Rwanda. See what's going on in Rwanda. And they're not the only country that's growing rapidly, right? You got other countries in Africa are growing significantly, like Botswana, Namibia. They're growing because they're developing rapidly.
Yeah. I guess because you say that, and I know, like, some of the Caribbean islands just became independent.
Well, so did a lot of the African countries around the same time.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. But it's just it's the mindset of the leader, right? Every country, contrary to popular opinion, countries grow. Most countries are run by like 10 people, even Canada and the US. Right. And the country evolves based on the mindset of those 10 people. Right.
Okay.
If those guys are progressive and they're clever, the country usually progresses. Right. They know how to maneuver with other countries. If they don't, those are backward nations, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's pretty simple, right? Like, and sometimes in a country, and what I've learned about countries, they don't always have to be democratic to be progressive. In the West, we always have, if the country's not democratic, it can't progress. Well,
Yeah.
China's not democratic.
Exactly.
Right. In fact, I would actually argue that in some cases, democracy hurts development. Right.
Wait, I have 2 more questions from you,
Right.
for you from Dr. Vive. Thank you, Dr. Vive. The questions. Are you saying that Black people will have more freedom under Chinese rule?
I'm not saying that at all.
Okay.
I'm not saying that at all.
Just
I'm saying, look, the reason a lot of these African countries are lining up with China is because they're looking at saying, look, the US, and they told this to Kamala Harris a few weeks ago to her face. The US killed a lot of our leaders, right? China has so far hasn't invaded anybody. It hasn't so far polluted any government, so to speak, right?
Okay.
It doesn't get involved in our politics, right? China is coming to us and saying, look, you want a hospital? We'll help you create a new hospital. The US is coming to you and saying, look, we want your oil, give it to us at the cheapest price. That's it. And if you don't, someone's going to get beaten up, right? So China is using a different approach. That doesn't mean that they're not trying to, the key in trade is who controls your assets, right?
Yes.
And you got to be smart about it, right? That's why countries are lining up. Like we're in the West, we're saying, oh, China, oh my God, China is like the big bogeyman. We're all, right? Because they're gaining in the West is losing ground to China. China's beat them at their own game. That's why they're so mad.
Yeah.
Right? It's not as if, like I said, if I'm an African country, nobody cares about us, right? I'm a black man. Very simple solution. Nobody gives a damn about people like me, right? Seriously, unless they're making money out of people who look like me, right? So I got no friends. Sorry, tough. It is what it is, right? This is just history, right? So I need to get my own game together, right? So
and they found a solution.
I found a solution, right?
Yes.
All right, right. Like China, what China is doing, China's saying, look, we want to help develop these countries because guess what? We're still a manufacturing hub of the world.
Help.
So right? We want, but the key is the African countries have to have their own agenda, right? As well. If you don't have an agenda, you shouldn't be having a discussion with another person if you don't have an agenda.
This goes to planning.
Every human
don't have a plan.
Every human needs to have an agenda, and you need to make the agenda clear to the other person you're against. If not, you will be gobbled up. You'll be eaten by their agenda. Nobody's coming to save you, right?
Hear that many times, golly.
Right?
Yes.
Right? Nobody's falling out of the sky to come and save you. Whoever's right, you have to save you, right? So these countries, if they're idiots, they think that they're dealing with charity. China's not interested in charity. This is a business, right? And you need a certain mindset when you're dealing with business.
And I guess it's in a sense you have to find a way to leverage what you
have to. And how am what am I gaining out of this? And what rules am I putting in play? I'm dealing with this guy, but okay, I want you to come here to help me build a hospital or some roads. But okay, how can I get my people involved in building those roads?
True.
Right?
True.
So we can get employment going, right?
Yes.
So we can have some
sort of build the economy.
Right.
More.
So we can have some sort of a trade, right? Like the trade historically with the West and the African countries, they come in, they take their resources and they give them nothing. Because the West has convinced itself that they deserve everything and you deserve nothing, right? I mean, if people don't believe what I'm saying, look at slavery, look at colonization. And if you can come up with something different from what I just said, you let me know, right? Because we got a couple hundred years of history here, right?
Yeah. So I'm really fascinated that in such a short period of time that you've been able to gain this knowledge, and I know I'm more into like personal finance and
that's great.
Budgeting and stuff. So where do you find these? How do you get this information for yourself, or what books have you read to gain more experience?
You know what people don't realize, a lot of this stuff, like I don't watch a lot of TV, right? And I look at a lot of history, and I look at a lot of Black history, and I look at a lot of documentaries. Like for example, right? I don't watch a lot of movies. I look at a lot of documentaries, right? I mean, like for example, right? And I'm not against movies. I do look at them. I just for every one movie I see, I probably see 10 documentaries. And that's not an accident. I planned it that way, right? Right. That doesn't mean I don't like to laugh. I'm like everybody else. I like a little bit of fun every now and again, right? Yeah. I'm a little low on the drama because I always say if I don't want to live in drama, I don't want to watch it, right? So right. I mean, like I always say, I'm into drama reduction, not drama production. Right. So right. So
I like that.
Right? So I have a very low tolerance of drama, right? And probably a lot less than the average person, right? So and I read books. If you go to YouTube, and you look at history, right?
That's true.
Like, and you look at Confessions of an Economic Hitman. You read stuff like that.
I like that one. That's the one I want to see. I actually want to check that one out.
And you just watch how things develop. You'll see, right? You'll see if you read all those things, right? You keep abreast. I don't really I don't pay much attention to like CNN and these guys because they're puppets of the system, I call them, right? And they promote the propaganda that we all buy into, right? And I mean, they're great for watching and then comprehending the opposite of what they say, right? But most of us don't do that, right? And I always look at it as like, why? I have a curiosity: is why do some countries develop and some don't? Why do some people develop and some don't? Right? And then how does it affect? Most people look at the stuff and say, oh, he or she is blessed. Or I'm saying, look, if we're gonna say who's blessed, then we have to discuss who's cursed, right? Right? Right?
True.
And
True.
it's generally not that simple. It's a little more to it than that, right? So let's look at what happened. Let's look at the mechanisms. Let's look at why they happen, right? And let's try to understand how it applies to us and what we could do with it, right?
I like that. Because
right.
Wait, which I have to say, I really want to find it. Confessions
of an Economic Hitman. If you just Google that,
save it. Economic Hitman. Okay, that one I'm interested in because I feel like when it comes to politics and world affairs, it does kind of trickle back into personal finance or financial literacy, because how else and knowing the history of certain things, how else are we going to know how to prepare for certain things that's coming up in the future? And
because with there's going to be money to be made.
Yes.
With all these things coming, right?
Because that's what I wanted.
Every situation, someone somewhere is making money.
Yes.
Every situation, even wars make a lot of people money. Like, I mean, like, for example, like, and I it sounds horrible to say, right? But there are companies in the US, right? And there are other countries as well that happen, right? That when there's a war happening, there's companies, for example, they benefit because, okay, like, let's say I decide that I'm going to blow up a bridge or whatever, right? These companies, one country decides they're going to blow up a bridge in another country. There's companies that'll go and clean up that bridge once the war is settled and rebuild it. There's tons of money in that, right? I mean, it sounds horrible, right? Right. And I mean, if you go back and look when the US was invading Iraq, right? At the time when George Bush was president, right? And you go down to his deputy. What's the guy's name? I forgot, his name escapes me right now. But I'm trying to think his name right now. Maybe Dr. Vibe knows. But anyway, what's the guy's name?
The deputy?
The deputy of George Bush, right? But I'm trying to think of his name. Anyway, I'll find it'll come to me in a minute. But here's the issue. Before the US invaded Iraq,
Richard?
right? No, I'm trying to think of what's the guy's name.
I thought it was Richard Bruce.
No, it wasn't. Was it Dick Cheney? It was Cheney.
Yes.
Dick Cheney, right?
Yeah.
So here, Cheney's old job before he became vice president was running a company called Halliburton, right?
Okay.
Halliburton is a company that makes money from disasters, right? Like wars, right?
Yes.
So when the US was invading Iraq, before they invaded Iraq, they planned to blow a whole bunch of things up. Like, for example, bridges, roads, hospitals, you name it, right? Cheney, it wasn't by chance that Halliburton got the vast majority of those contracts to rebuild those bridges and hospitals and whatever, right? Right. So he gave it all those contracts to his old company, right? The vast majority of those contracts, to the point where there were people suing the US government not because they thought the war was wrong, because they didn't get access to those contracts, right?
Golly.
So remember, like, when a country gets blown up, like when Ukraine is being blown up right now, right? I'm willing to bet right this minute there's a bunch of companies that are already planning to go into Ukraine and rebuild it. Right?
There's even a bond from Canada to help.
Canada has companies like that too, right? Australia has them too. A lot of countries have. England has them. They all have them. So imagine right now, there's a hospital that's up and running in a particular area. And then the country says, okay, we're going to bomb this country. We're going to bomb that hospital, right? There's people in it. They're collateral damage, right? But don't worry. When it's done, you're going to go in there and rebuild it, right? So like I said, there was guys suing the US government, not because they thought the war was wrong, but they didn't get access to the contracts to rebuild because those contracts are worth billions of dollars, right? So war is a big money-making event, right? And I think like, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I mean, like, look, I'm a black, as you can obviously see, I'm a black man. I come from a race of people who lots of money's been made off of the backs of people who look like me, right? Right.
Yeah.
So we are experts on that. We may not think we are, but we've been involved. We weren't the companies building it, but we were the guys taking the laws, right?
Golly. Yes.
Right. I mean, like it's like 2 weeks ago. I'll give you an example. Like 2 weeks ago, I couldn't watch the coronation of Charles, right? I hate the concept of royalty. I think it's it's a great idea if you're a part of the family. If you're not a part of the family, which is 99% of the population, you're a sucker, right? Right? And you're a pawn in their game, right?
Yeah.
Because I know when I look at those jewels, some of those jewels came from my country. A guy who looked like me was digging in a mine somewhere, got those jewels, then somebody shortchanged him or shot him, but took the jewels, right? So like when he's parading the coronation, I'm looking at stolen material here, right?
Agree.
And a lot of people who their stuff was stolen from look like me, right? So why would I revel in the fact that, oh my God, he's a new king, right? I'm amazed that the masses didn't rise up 1,000 years ago and say this idea is stupid, because what's in it for them other than being cheerleaders, right? Right. I mean, okay, this family is getting rich off of you and you're not benefiting, but you must love them. Okay, think of the psychosis behind that, right? The psychology behind that is we're playing you and we're telling you we're playing you. That's what's happening here.
And there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, and you're supposed to enjoy it. And you're supposed to enjoy it. Right. So that's why, like, well, I can't look at royalty because I just think it's a ridiculous idea that I'm amazed that people have. It just shows me how gullible people are, right? If you believe that, right?
And I think it's something that we spoke about yesterday is that we're so accustomed to certain things in history that it's like, well, I could at least say my grandma didn't watch it, but like, it was just something that we've been raised for so many years or generations.
It's conditioning, right? It's conditioning.
Yeah.
Like people don't realize, like, the whole process of slavery and colonization is conditioning. It's a psychological concept with a physical appearance, right? That's really what it is, right? Like, I mean, my own mother loved royalty, but in her generation, they were brought up to think, oh, it was wonderful, right? As I grew older and like, wait a minute, this doesn't add up, right? Right? Like, right? This doesn't add up. And this is a ridiculous idea, right? So, and in England, what they didn't tell you about the coronation is that the younger generation wants no part of that. So
I think I've acknowledged that because, like,
right? They're under their royal family. I don't think they're going to be around 100 years because the kids that are coming up now, the YouTube generation has no use for that, right? Right. So, right, they have no use for that, right? And they weren't reporting on the fact that a lot of people were against it. But if you understand the history of it, it's hard to be for it. Like,
since she passed, it's been in the forefront, like,
right. But it's a ridiculous notion. If you stop and think about it, logically, it doesn't make sense. These guys are the benefits. They're people we talk about, the cartels of Colombia, whatever. They're worse. It's just that we've sanitized it. They've been sanitized to make us feel as, oh my God, they're nice, right? Like you don't get all that wealth. It wasn't people just didn't give
nice.
it to them. They killed. That's blood money. Whenever you see all those jewels, those are blood jewels, right? Like if, as a Guyanese person, if I go to England and I go to some of their museums and I'm looking at the jewels and I pay to go to the museum and I see, oh, that jewel is from Guyana. Okay, so I paid money to go to a museum to watch a person who looks like me who probably lost his life giving up that jewel. So what does that make me? Right? At very least, a puppet. Somewhere on the parameter of being a puppet to an idiot, right? Because somewhere in there lies the truth. right? I'm a
Yeah.
puppet
Oh,
or an idiot, one of the two, right? Right?
gosh.
Because I'm supporting my own the demise of people who look like me. This doesn't make sense, right?
It
But
doesn't. It doesn't. You're right.
it's been
You're absolutely
it's been
right.
sanitized, so it looks as though it makes sense, but it really has. It really isn't doesn't make sense,
Well, hopefully there's a way
right?
that we can acknowledge that and be able
But
to like I'm not gonna say steal it back per se because I
well,
don't want
it's not a matter of
the
stealing it back.
ideas,
It's not.
but like being able to get that
Should,
recognition.
well, it's not even. I don't worry about recognition. Like people talk about. Look, if you steal from me, I don't want an apology. I want my stuff back.
True.
Right?
Yes, exactly.
I don't want my right. I don't want an apology. That's not going to do me any good. I want my stuff back.
Can I get interest with it?
And yes, I should, right? So I'm like, so people get all bent out of shape. Oh, it's an apology. They apologize. Well, yeah, they apologize, but they kept it, right? There you go again. You're tricking me by promoting the apology, right?
Look,
You're dangling that carrot, right? And I'm falling for the silly carrot, right? Because at the end of the day, they're still winning, right?
Yeah.
So like, don't tell me, they apologize. Oh, they apologize for colonialism. Okay, well, how do we account for the hundreds of thousands of guys that died?
Exactly. And it's
right?
not,
So,
yeah. No.
you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. That's just my way of looking at it. But
Yeah.
I know it's probably not popular way to look at it, but it is what it is, right?
No, but it's the truth. Like at the same time, like it is something that I feel like the younger generation is understanding the mistakes or damage that was done in the past, and hopefully they'll be able to find a way to
Yeah, well,
rectify it.
they're less tolerant, right? They're less tolerant, and I think even like with BRICS and these things, right? These countries know, look, we got a young population, and if we don't do something different, if we allow ourselves to be taken indefinitely, they're gonna rise up against us, right? So it's like, okay, we need to figure this out fast, right?
Yeah.
Because they're young, they're aggressive, and they're less forgiving than the previous generations, right? Right.
Indeed.
So if we don't do this, if we don't do something different and figure out how to feed these people, we're gonna end up. A hungry man is a dangerous man, right? That's a fact, right? Right. So if you want security, you're gonna have to figure out how to employ these especially a bunch of young men, right? You don't want a bunch of them angry, right?
Angry and hungry. My gosh.
Yeah, someone's gonna get hurt, right? Someone's gonna get hurt, right? So if you're running a government, you got to figure this stuff out, right? And I think, and these countries are saying, look, the past. Who cares about the past? We need a different future, right? And we don't mind bypassing the traditional route. Like in the past, countries were scared. They're not scared,
They're
right?
not
Like
scared anymore.
if you go up against a bunch of guys that are intimidated, it's an easy victory. You go up against the same guys and they're not intimidated, good luck. Right? Right?
That is
because
true.
They're not just gonna roll over, right? They're not just gonna roll over. So then we'll find out who's really tough, right? Because there's going to be resistance.
I'm looking forward to this. I'm so happy I met you.
Oh,
and that you were able
nice
to, because I couldn't articulate it as you did, because you've done the research and you've done the research and the history, and like since 2019 you said, and even before that. So golly, how are you able to, like, not even that?
I just pay attention to what's going on. And when I did radio years ago, my motto was, what's the story behind the story?
And that now makes sense,
right?
Why know so much.
Here's what I found, right? Most stories, like when you watch the news, you hear the story, a story. Oh my God, there's a problem in a country. Oh my God, that country is falling apart, right? Okay, that is true, right? Well, my thing is, okay, what's the other story? Like I always say, look, like for example, right now, there's a civil war in Sudan, right? That was on the news a few weeks ago, right? I always say, look, there's no such thing as a civil war, right? First of all, war isn't civil. right? Right? We're killing each other. There's nothing civil about that, right? And number two, right? Right? It's
No lies.
usually they're outside forces stimulating
That.
the guys on the inside.
Yes. Yeah.
Who's behind it? The
Yes.
question is, so my next question is, who's behind it? Yeah, the Sudanese are killing each other. Yeah, no two ways about it. Who's even these rebel armies? Who's funding these rebel armies? Right, like a lot of times these countries are dirt poor, but these armies have the latest in weapons. Weapons aren't cheap. Where are the weapons coming from? Who's putting the weapons there? What's in it for them? Are there any resources? Right?
Yeah.
People, we're not fighting. People don't fight for nothing, right? They don't just fight because, oh, you know what, we're bored, so let's just fight each other, right?
Yeah.
Usually there's something else behind the story. Okay, do they have oil there? What resources do they have? Right? Who's funding this? Right? Usually it's another country funding it, saying, look, you know what? You need to, if you help us do this, you get this.
And I think it's safe to know, I feel like we've been acknowledging that for the last, when was 2011? Why am I having a brain fart? Like the last
okay.
12 years, we've acknowledged like there are certain reasons why there's war.
There's always a reason. There's always a reason. But the problem is, it's generally never the reason you're told. That's what I found. Like, for example, the argument generally is, oh, freedom and democracy, right? That's a general argument. Look, the rich countries don't care about freedom and democracy, right? If you go look at their history, right?
Yeah.
They have dealt with guys who were dictators and this and the other, right? So even though they may be branding one guy a dictator, what they're really telling you is, okay, he ticked us off. And now we're going to teach him a lesson. They don't care if he's like, if he's
bullying, guys.
Right? No, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I always say, what's the story behind the story? Because most of us are what I call surface seekers, right? It's like if I took you to the ocean and you looked at the ocean and you said, oh, I said, what do you see? Oh, I see water, I see waves. Okay, yeah. And I say,
can't go too deep though. I can't go too deep.
Right?
I don't swim.
Right. Well, I say, okay. I say, yeah, don't worry. I'm not telling you to jump in.
Yeah.
But we know in that water, if we're looking at the ocean, we know that there's certain things in the ocean, right? There may be jellyfish.
Don't want to know.
There may be jellyfish, right? There's different water temperatures depending on what part of the ocean we're in, right? Are we at the bottom? Are we in the middle? Are we at the top? Right? We might find a few sharks in there. There might be a few orcas in there, right? But we know that there's stuff in there. We just can't see them right at that moment.
That's a great analogy, actually.
Right? So generally, if you just look at the surface, you generally miss a story, right? That's what I found, right? Because most people just look at the surface. Like, why is this happening? My question is, why is it happening? And who's behind it? There's usually somebody pulling the strings, right? And the other guys are on the front line.
Always, right? Like no matter
what. Not random. It's not random. People aren't fighting each other just because they're bored, right? There's something else going on, right? Yeah. And my question is, what is going on, right? And we think that happens all over the world. That happens actually here as well, right?
True.
Right? I mean, we could have another conversation where I could give you examples of stuff I've witnessed.
Yeah.
That happened right here in Toronto, right? Right?
Well, I mean, even, and I'm glad you just, and I don't know if it's gonna relate, but like even with like Mississauga breaking up with Brampton, that's in itself something like,
it's an interesting development. Yeah, it's an interesting development. I mean, we don't really. They would argue that it's cheaper to go that route.
Yeah.
Right? Time will tell if it is, right?
Only time will tell.
Yeah, really. But we don't really know. And I guess on the surface we could take their answer as the real answer, right? But once again, like I said, right? If you stick to the surface, you will generally miss the point, right? Right?
I like that thing. Right. If you stick to the surface, okay.
Right? Like because and you could argue, I'm seeing what I'm seeing, and that's true.
Yeah.
Right. But
there's always something deeper.
what are you not seeing that's going on, right? And that's my argument, right?
True.
Because everything is it's how we see one narrative presented to us and we say, oh yeah, that's got to be it,
But
right?
yeah,
But-
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I like how you've been able to dig deep into like what's happened, and I just wanted people to get a perspective of BRICS, because I'm pretty sure someone's gonna listen to this and they'll be like, say what?
yeah,
And
oh
not be
no, I
aware,
understand that. I understand, and it's a
but
lot.
then have a
It's
better understanding now
yeah,
that
yeah.
they've listened.
Well,
And
hopefully, yeah, we've shed some light
no,
on it.
I honestly, I've been looking at the comments, like comments here and elsewhere, and you are popular, sir. So
Oh,
I'm
really?
very happy. You are. So I'm very happy that we
Ah,
were able to
nice.
connect. Like, what are the odds that we, and mind you, I don't usually go out on a Friday, but I was like, no, let me go out.
Well, well, I'll tell you the truth, and I told this to Dr. Vibe last night. It's really interesting
Mm,
because, well, number one, I was shocked to see him. I didn't expect to see him last night.
I
And
remember. Yes.
you rewind, you go back a month or two.
Mm-hmm.
We're not meeting last night because I had a different schedule from a work perspective, right? Before I used to work at night. And
Yeah.
just in the last month, my schedule has changed, right? So and last night, even in getting there last night,
Mm-hmm.
I initially saw the ad for it, promo a few days prior. And then for
Same.
some reason I couldn't find it last night. I
Oh
thought about it yesterday. I said, oh my
no.
gosh, am I gonna go? Am I gonna go? I couldn't
Yeah.
find it last night.
Yeah.
And then I got home and I checked my phone again. I'm like, wait a minute, I found it, right? And I'm like, oh,
Nice.
right. I was like, okay, it's not far from where I am. So let me just go over, right? And I wasn't
Nice.
expecting, let me just check this out because I like the idea of a community podcast hub, right? And let me just go over, see what's going on. Because as I'm trying to learn, this is a learning process for me, right? So let me just
Yes.
see what's going on. So I just went over there and, okay, I'll be a fly in the wall and see if, I'll pick up something, right? And, I'm usually, as you can probably tell, I'm a pretty shy guy. So, right. So,
But you know what? I say the same thing in myself. But it's once you know others, you get comfortable and you're able to.
yeah, that's exactly what happened. Yeah. And I was shocked. Like I said, I was shocked to see Dr. Vibe last night because we've been friends for years. Like we're talking like probably over 10 years, right?
I
And
swear to you, I know how popular he is. So the fact that you are here, I know. This is a big deal. Just the fact that you're on here, I feel like it's a big deal because.
Well, I'm glad you had to, you took the time to want to have me on. Like,
yeah.
I mean, I enjoyed being here. Right, it's been a really interesting conversation. Hopefully, I've shed some light on things. But
I'm here. I'm seeing great episode. Dr. Vibe was having some great questions. Asking great questions just to get
yes,
a better understanding, and I'm just here enjoying the history because as much as I want to be as informed as you are, I think it's true. Listening to documentaries and you'll have a better understanding of what's going on instead of listening to the rah rah.
exactly. I mean, and I'm not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against the rah rah, but every now and again we need to stop giggling and figure out what's really going on, right?
True,
And
especially right now.
And my argument always is, especially when it comes to people of African descent, we haven't always been told the full story about ourselves.
Correct.
Right. And we spend a lot of time trying to communicate with other people. I always say that's a waste. In my opinion, that's a waste of time. We need to learn about ourselves. Right. We don't really know about ourselves. We're still coming out of that, what I call that slave culture. Right. And we need to learn. If we learn more about ourselves,
yes,
don't go to your neighbor's house when you're struggling at home. Right. Figure it out home first. Right.
Yeah.
right.
True.
True. I'm not against your neighbor.
Yeah.
But first things first.
Your neighbor
right?
doesn't know as much as you do
and
about yourself.
Yeah,
about
and they
yourself.
shouldn't. I mean, everyone. The thing about us is that everyone has studied us. My question is, who have we studied? Right? Everyone has created systems to exploit us. What systems are we going to create?
That is
right?
True.
Right? We've been studied. Like I know we've been studied.
Yeah.
Right? But have we studied anyone? That's the question. right?
It's
Like
time to
we
study.
always talk about the system,
Mhm.
and those are legitimate arguments. But do we have our own system? Are we creating systems? Right? Right?
Slowly but
Are we
surely.
learning? Right? Are we learning from our past? Right? Right? I
Mhm.
mean, like, and the thing about it is, one thing I've learned about our people is that we're smarter than we think. We're
Yeah.
richer than we think. We have a lot
Mhm.
more going for us than we think. But we tend to live in silos, right? And because we live in silos, we don't really connect, right? And that's the problem. We're not connecting, right? I
Mhm.
mean, like if you look at it from a straight economic standpoint, the 40 million blacks that live in the US are richer than the 500 million that live in Africa, right? Now, 40 versus 500. 40 are richer than 500, right?
Damn.
Now, think about that for a minute, right? So,
Yes.
in theory, like I watched a video this week with Dr. Umar Johnson. I'm a big fan of his, right? And
Mhm.
he said, look, if Africa was to connect with the US, Africa would grow. That's a no-brainer. He's absolutely correct, right?
True.
But we're not connecting, right? Well, the US is not connecting with
Mm.
itself, right? Right? So but like, because my argument is the Black community always looks to other people to come and help them and bail them out. I'm saying you don't need to do that. You have everything within your
You have the resources.
jurisdiction, so to speak, right? You just don't realize it, right?
Mhm.
And since the narrative that you have of yourself is always told by other people, right? You will never, very rare will you get a positive message under those circumstances, right? It's like, if you ask a lions and wildebeest, the lion is a predator to wildebeest. You ask the
Yes.
lion about the wildebeest. The wildebeest is in the lion's mind, the wildebeest is a victim, right? 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 So he's never going to portray the wildebeest. Oh my God, I feel sorry for him. Well, why? Why would I feel sorry for him? He's dinner, right?
My next meal.
Yeah, so I don't feel sorry for him. I'm going to chase 1,000 of them, and I'll find a slow one, and
Yeah.
I'm going to gobble up that slow one, right? And that's how the game is played, right? So the wildebeest has to tell his side of the story, right? And too
Exactly, and learn
often,
how to run fast too.
yeah,
Golly.
right, and learn the pack, and too often, blacks are the wildebeest, right? Right, and everybody else is the lion, right? So,
Golly. So we really have to learn to stick together as a pack, because
yeah. I'm not. And when I say that, I don't mean 100%, but you just need a few people, a few key people,
yeah,
right, to figure
to do
stuff
that.
out. But you can do a lot more. Like I said, 40 million could take care of 500 million. Like, it's not.
Hey,
It sounds, on the surface, it sounds ridiculous,
but
but
no,
it really isn't,
no,
because
I
they
don't
have the
think it's
money.
ridiculous.
They're the
Yeah.
richest. They're the richest blacks in the world by default,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're not even that organized. They're not even. They're disorganized, quite frankly, right? I mean, and I'm telling you, I've been to several cities, right, in the
Yes.
US,
Yeah.
right? Several big cities. I've seen all kinds of ghettos, right? Black ghettos, white ghettos, Hispanic ghettos. Like, I've driven through them, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like, so, like, and especially in our community, and I've seen the flip side of that too. I've seen all black golf courses, which I haven't seen here, right? And I saw them in the US, right? So there's a mixed bag, right? It's a mixed bag, right? And I'm just saying, look, if it was organized, that group was organized, right? Things could take off. It's like, I know Guyana could bail out the English-speaking Caribbean if Guyana's up and running properly, because Guyana is potentially very rich, right? Right. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying it can, right? Right. I'm not saying it's going
Well,
to.
we
It should,
want it to happen, right? So
right?
we can.
But I'm just
Finally...
saying, in theory, it can happen, right? In theory and reality are two different things. But the theory is that the potential exists, right?
Yeah.
Right. You understand? So, right. And it's the same thing with us in, say, Africa, right? The same sort of thing, right? Like,
well, I'm sorry. No.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just thinking, like, I hope there's, even though it's in theory, it's a great South Africa or Guyana is able to flourish the other countries. I hope it happens. Like,
it potentially can happen.
Like, that would be crazy history.
Yeah. Well, it's like South Africa has the infrastructure, right? It's a pretty advanced country. Like those races were pretty advanced, and that sounds like a ridiculous comment, right? But they were pretty advanced, right? And so when they took it, they had a right. they were
Yeah.
they were pretty sophisticated. They were racist, but they were sophisticated, right? And they had a really good infrastructure. So like the leaders that come along now, if they can take advantage of the infrastructure and get the masses involved, right? Because remember, you have a country like 40 million people. Whites are only 5 million in that country, right? But they created a system to bail out the whites at the expense of the blacks, right? Now, if you
surprise, surprise.
right? Well, it's history repeating itself, right? Right, divide and conquer, all those wonderful things, right? But if you create a situation where you can bring in, even of the 40 million or whatever is left over, if you can bring in half of that or even a quarter of that, you got some different dynamics on your hand, right?
True.
Right. Right.
Golly.
So I'm just saying, if a lot of it is just will, right? The leaders have the will to do it. They can do it, right?
True.
They do, right? You could. It's not impossible, right? Like if you go and look at a lot of history of a lot of countries, there's a lot of miraculous things that have happened over the years that people thought were impossible, right? Like I said, China,
I know. Yeah, and
like
in Korea,
Korea, Saudi
South
Arabia, Qatar, all these countries, right?
Dubai,
right? Like these things have happened recently. Like,
or I think
when
I
I say
said
recently,
wrong.
what?
United.
UAE? You're talking about UAE?
That's what I meant to say. Not sorry,
phenomenal.
guys,
These countries are phenomenal success stories, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So I hope we are able to see that in the Caribbean.
Yeah,
and
I would love to see it.
Right?
I would love to see it. I think it's possible, but I think do we have the will, right?
I feel like we do. As long as they see what if they're able to like listen to documentaries and figure out strategies, I think it will happen.
The simplest, if they were smart, if those countries, any of those countries were smart, they would tap into their diaspora. And that would bring them along real quick, real fast.
True.
Right? True. Most of them are hung up on concepts of the past, right? And they think they know it all and this, that, and the other. But if you tapped into the diaspora, that could steamroll the country real fast. Like I'm talking like 20 years. You could see like within a generation, you could see like phenomenal development, right? And I'm not just saying it because I'm pulling stuff out of my head. Like it has actually happened in other countries, right? You don't hear about it, right? It's not in the news, right? But it's actually happened, right? Like, I mean, like we had the World Cup the other day in Qatar, right?
Yeah.
Qatar built, when they won the World Cup, when they owned the rights to the World Cup, they didn't have stadiums. They built stadiums in like a 10-year span to facilitate the World Cup. They built cities.
We're still waiting for Eglinton to finish their.
Well, don't get me started. But that's another story. That's another story in itself, right? I mean, I think the reasonable question is who should go to jail. But anyway, right. But right. I refrain from discussing that any further. Right.
Oh my gosh, that's a different story. That is a different story for real. But you know which questions I almost forgot, like because I always like to know the history, like not history, your journey. But how about what you wish you knew when you were younger about personal finance?
It's a really good question. That's a really good question. I wish that was taught in schools at a young age.
Yeah.
Right. I think it should be. Right. I think personal finance should be taught in schools. I think relationships should be taught in schools. Right. 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 I probably should. I should probably stop while I'm going good. But no, but really, I really do believe so. Right. Because I think if you learn things at a young age, you don't develop bad habits, and you don't, right? And then you're not playing catch up later on, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible to catch up, because things are happening now at a faster pace, right? From a financial standpoint, right? And But if the earlier you learn them, the earlier you get exposed to them, it's a good it's a lot you're better positioned, and it's a lot easier for you not to develop bad habits, right? Because easier generally we develop bad habits than we try to turn them into good habits, right? It's easier to develop bad habits. It's just basically the nature of things, right? And
we're human.
Right. Most things are negative, and then we try to find a way to make them positive, right? And yeah, so I think like personal financial stuff like that definitely should be taught in schools. I think even for myself, I think I wish I'd stuck to my own ideas and my gut more. Right, because a lot of times you have an idea, and it's out of the ordinary, right? And sometimes you got to be careful.
Talk your way out.
You talk yourself out of it, and you also got to be careful who you discuss it with, right? Because sometimes people they don't see it, they don't understand it, right? So they're negative, right? And so a lot of times, I think we probably need to learn about following our own intuition, right? And sometimes you don't have to have this broad knowledge. Sometimes a lot of it is in your gut. You have a sense of like, oh, I think that's going to do well, right? And because you see it, and you kind of like, sometimes you have a vision.
Yes.
Right. Sometimes you can't explain why you have the vision, but it's like I said, we're talking about your gut, right? Like I think you learn from, you're reading, you learn from watching documentaries, all these kind of things. There's ways to learn, but also sometimes you can come across it and think, you know what, I just think, and it's almost if you're betting to a certain extent, which sounds like gambling, but I can see something going in a direction before it actually takes off. And then to have the guts to say, you know what, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
Right. Because I know I've had a lot of those. Right. Right.
That reminds me of the book that I'm reading. Oh my gosh. Think and Grow Rich.
Good book. I've read it. I probably need to read it again. Right. I think I probably need to read it again. I've read it many years ago, and I probably need to read it again. Sometimes we need a refresher, right? And I think, right. And I think, we need to develop a relationship where we're not scared of these things, right? Because a lot of times we're scared, right? Like, we come from, like I always say, Black people generally, and I don't care what part of the world they live in, I don't care what culture they're in, I don't care what language they speak. They have a lot of similarities, right? And we're basically a fear-based people masquerading as faith-based people, right? Right. And right. Yes. Seriously, that's my take on it, right? People, I know in some areas, in some circles, that'll ruffle some feathers, and the chickens will get all upset, right? But our history is based on fear, right? And people say, what's fear? Well, fear is you're scared, or fear. Fear is a word, means you're scared. Fear is as an acronym, like F period E period A period, is, what do they say? False evidence appearing real, right? Right. Yes. And but we come from a history in which we've been told to be, we have fair base, right? Like if you go back and look at even the history, in a lot of the plantations, there was 500 blacks and 50 whites. Well,
they were just afraid to.
Yeah, but they were conditioned, right? We're conditioned. Yes. Oh my God, if you run away, no. Okay, they're enslaving you. You should go for it, right? Right. Okay, you're just free labor. You should need to go for it, right?
Try it.
Right. But it's a reason why they condition, right? Like if I'm going to conquer you, I've got to condition you first, right? Yeah. Before I conquer you. Right, you don't get like you always say. I always say, if you wanted the body, you had to get the mind first, right? Right. You don't get if you try to get the body and you haven't got the mind, there's gonna be resistance, right? So, right, and right. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, right? Right. And whatever way you're thinking about it, you're right.
Whoa, Johnny, you're
Right?
right. You're right.
Okay. So it's just, am I wrong?
You aren't wrong, sir.
All right. Right. So, right. So that's just how, stuff
Yeah,
tends to work, right?
conditioning and stuff. But
Right.
and I'm trying to and what not conditioning. I can't even merge into from that. But I know you're not fearful of podcasting or broadcasting and stuff because you have a lot of years experience with it. But what other avenues or projects are you thinking of doing in the future? Since I'm pretty sure someone was forced to get an IG. Yes.
I was, and you know what, here's the thing. Here's the thing. It's funny.
Yeah.
I got that up and running last night, right? But you know what? I don't spend a lot of time trying to focus so much on, I try to understand fear. And even if that being said,
Yeah.
I always say that I consider myself an open-minded skeptic,
Yeah.
right? So I may be skeptical to an idea, but I'm open-minded to hear it, right?
It's just
So
key.
like, yeah. So for example, I listen to podcasts of people who are fundamentally the opposite of who I am. Right? Right.
Just to understand them.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Right.
I actually like that because you're able to know different
They're fundamentally opposite of me. And I know that they are.
Yeah.
Right. So right. Because
I like that.
I always it's like you're playing a sport. You want to understand offense and defense, right? So it's not so much about what I agree with. It's what I understand, right? That's what I focus on. Not what right? I always say it's more important to understand than to agree. Most people think it's, I gotta agree on everything. No, you don't. Right?
No.
So right. So it's like, it's like I'm gonna, for example, I'm gonna meet with a friend of mine, and he's the polar opposite of who I am, right? Right.
Which is fine.
Yeah, we're respectful of each other, right? It doesn't lead to any disrespect, right?
Yeah.
And he has different insights on things, right? So I like to share my insights. He shares his, and I said, well, let me see. I want to understand why you are the way you are, right? Because it sheds some light on some of the ideas I may have, right? And it's people think, like I said, I'm not saying everybody I know and I'm friends with, I'm like that. There's a lot of guys, more people I'm like, who I'm friends like are similar to me, right? But there's also people who are not similar to me
and different,
who I try to keep abreast of, right? Right.
And
that plays into all this stuff, right? That plays into all this. Like, well, this is essentially the basis of our discussion, right?
Yeah.
I try to understand what's going on, right? It's not what I like, it's what I understand, right? And so it's
I like
and
that.
then I go from there because I may be missing something, so I may learn from him, right? I may be missing something. He can add something to what I'm agreeing with or working on or whatever, right? We can expand on that, right?
I like that.
So like I'm like I'm a fairly, I don't know, guess for lack of a better word, liberal guy, so to speak, right? In my thought patterns, right? But I listen to guys who are conservative in podcasts, right? And it's deliberate. I deliberately do that, right? It's not an accident. I deliberately listen to them, right?
So does that mean you're deliberately listening to them to potentially come back into the game?
I plan to do that. I'm already been working on trying to put the guests together and all this kind of stuff. And
I
think
guess
I should
Dr.
go? What do you think?
Vibe
You think I should go for it? What do you
honestly,
think?
because I'm not gonna lie, because from when you had, because I'm not gonna tell everyone what we were doing yesterday, but we had like a little what would you call improv thing, and how your improv was really amazing and
Oh,
had
thanks.
me thinking.
Like, what
And
did I
then
say that was so interesting? I
with the
don't even remember.
happiness, the if money can buy you happiness, in my eyes it can, but you were just the way that you were articulating your thought process. I was like, okay, I get it. Boom. And then just us having this conversation and just listening to you, I was like, damn, he knows a lot. And because you know a lot from different aspects, because we were talking about other things, and I was like, dang. So, and obviously, you know, Dr. Vibe. So I know that you have value. You know, you just know. I could just get a great feeling from you, and I think your knowledge definitely needs to be shown. And I believe
Oh,
Dr.
thanks.
Vibe mentioned that voice from Black men are important as well. And I think voices
Yeah.
from Black people in general is very
Yeah,
important.
I understand. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we need narratives, right? We need narratives, right? Like I always tell guys, like I think Africa's biggest problem is that it needs a network, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it needs a network because and people get excited. Oh, we got the BBC there, right? Okay, CNN there. You're wasting your time. You need your own narrative. Like remember, you know, wildebeest and lions, and you're not the lion, right? Historically, you've been the wildebeest, right? You're the ones getting eaten, right? So we need the wildebeest needs to pick up the mic, right? Right. So, and that's what I think, right? They need their own voices. Everyone needs a voice. Everybody needs a voice, right? And if you just simply wait for the mainstream,
it's not gonna work.
It's probably not your stream, really.
Yeah, that's
you know
a good one. Yeah,
right. It's probably not your stream, right? And you need, yeah. And I think we need, like, we have a lot of, you know, sports and entertainment, as Dr. Vibe said, and that's true. But I think we need diversity in our thought patterns as well, right?
It's ideal or beneficial for us to be well-rounded or more be able to dabble into each type of topic, because sports and entertainments can pay the bills, I guess, but like how else are you going to be able to know all the fundamentals with like finance, world?
Oh, and you know what? You know what? We could actually use sports and entertainment to discuss those things.
True.
Right?
True.
Like I always tell kids when you're playing sports, if you think you're just running up and down the court, you're missing the point. Right? Like you could learn, right? You can learn teamwork, you can learn strategy.
Yeah.
Right? You can learn preparation. You can learn a slew of things from sports. You can learn psychology, right? Like, you know what I mean? So you're not just, so you could leverage those things to learn other things. Like you can talk about business. You can talk about money. You can talk about finance from sports, right?
True. I've seen it happen.
And so it's just the thing about it. If you simply look at sport as a sport, I think you're silly, right? At the very least, you're short-sighted. At the very least, right? You might actually, right?
Surface level.
Right. Because I know guys, like, for example, I love sports. I love college sports in the US, right? I've been to some games and stuff like that, right? And I've met guys who have their kids are trying to get scholarships. And when we talk about college sports, they have no idea what they're talking about, but they want their kid to get a scholarship, right? And I'm saying to him, I'll give you an example. Right? I'll say to a guy, do you want your kid to have a 4-year scholarship or 4 1-year scholarships? Right. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? Right. And he thinks it's the same thing. And I said, no, the scholarship is 4 1-year scholarships. Right. Right. So it's a contract that's renewable every year at the school's discretion. Right. People don't realize it. People don't want a guy got a scholarship. He's got a scholarship for 4 years. Yeah, he's locked in for 4 years, but it's renewable every year. And not at his discretion, right? At the school's discretion, right?
But now, is that a good thing?
Huh?
Is that a good thing?
Well, it depends. It's a thing. It depends on, and now there's a little more freedom. Right? We could have another 2-hour conversation about that, right? But it's like right. But it's I'm just, my point is that a lot of times how we look at sports, and this is where it comes back as a community, we look at sports and it's fun and games and this and the other, right? Well, when it's fun and games, if it's simply fun and games, when we're talking $1 million contracts, it's no longer just fun and games.
True.
Right?
It's a business in
it is a
in
business,
a sense.
right? It not in a sense, in all senses. It's like when we say sports and entertainment, sports business and entertainment business. Yeah, it's a little bit of sport and a lot of business. It's right.
You're
front and back end.
right.
A little bit of entertainment and a lot of business. Right.
Agree. And you know what? I'm glad you mentioned that. And darn, I know we're not gonna, because this could go down a different path. But it's like, if individuals that are so focused on being in the entertainment and sports world knew how important having the business mindset is, they would probably do more research, just like your friend's your friend's children trying to go to college basketball, and they actually knew like all the information.
Yeah, they had no idea. They're just thinking
they just want to put their foot in their door. They just want,
they're thinking about, oh, he's got all the skills. He's been dribbling. He's been shooting the ball. Okay, and I'm saying, okay, I'm not saying that's not bad. That's what he needs to get in. However, do you understand what you're getting involved in? Do you understand what you're getting involved in? Like, I've been to Ohio State University, for example. I've been on the campus.
Yeah.
Right? I've been on the campus when they had big television games. Right. I've seen how the campus works. I've seen how the sport works. Right. Like those guys, they're in a different world. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm an advocate for the athletes. I always have been. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I always say athletes should make as much as they can possibly get. I think everyone should make as much as they possibly get. Right. But
right. Let me just let me sip on the water for that one.
Right. And right. But it's a lot of times they weren't getting that. Right. They were getting exploited. Right. Because people don't realize, like, the NCAA, the guy who modeled the modern day version of the NCAA in the US, which is the governing body for college sports, he modeled it after the plantation system.
Oh,
right?
I knew you were going to say it.
This is not my idea.
I knew you were going to say it.
He publicly acknowledged it. The guy publicly acknowledged it. He wrote a book about it, even. Right? So it's been modeled after the plantation system. Right? This is not my idea. Yeah. This is the creator of this concept publicly said this, right? Yes. Right? Not just me, is that right? Like, don't shoot the messenger, right?
Yep.
but
not at all.
Right. And so that tells you all you need to know about what you're involved in, right?
Yeah.
Right. I'm not saying people shouldn't get involved. I'm just saying know what you're getting.
Know everything. Yes, absolutely.
That's all I'm saying, right? People think, oh, when I say that, oh my God, you're saying, I'm not saying that. I'm saying, look, if you're going to get involved in this, like, look, if I would tell you, if you're going to take a walk in the wintertime, put on a thick coat, right? Like,
and some shoes and boots.
Exactly. Right. I'm just, you know what I mean? This is the same sort of thing I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Right.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not saying don't go for a walk. Right. Right. So, right.
And you know what? It brings us back to BRICS. Like, what is one advice? Because I feel like, again, people might feel like overwhelmed when they hear about BRICS. What's one thing a regular Joe or Jane could do just to be more aware about what's happening with BRICS, and just to be on the lookout still? Because I'm
yeah. Well, I mean, I think you're going to hear more about it in the future. You're not hearing that much about it now. You're going to hear, because as the countries get more involved in it, there's no way around it. You're going to hear it. It's going to become, it's going to become
30 countries.
Well,
there's 30 countries that we don't even know.
5 countries have signed up.
Yes.
As the basically the pillars of it. 30 are investigating joining. Right? They're paying a real close attention, because what they're seeing is that, oh my God, if these guys pull it off, I may not get my knuckles wrapped, right? So it makes sense for me to join, right? And
You're
I know
right.
another 30, and there's probably a potential another 50 that are watching, right? Right? Right?
That's really crazy.
Right? So we could have a
I'm
shift.
excited.
We
Yes,
could
a
have a
big
shift, right?
shift.
But it's just, I think what's going to happen is the other countries are going to have to adjust,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, historically, one thing I'll tell you, one thing I've learned about, and this European people are masters of adjustment, right? Right. So like they adjusted after slavery, they adjusted after colonization. They will adjust the BRICS, right. But I think,
Accordingly.
right, they're masters of it. They're going to try and they're not just going to roll over and say it's done. That's not how they function, right? Right. It's like anybody who's in power just generally concedes. They don't just, oh, you know what? Oh yeah, you know what? I've got 90% of the game and I don't want 91. That's not how they function. They got 90 and they're thinking, how come I get 91, 92, 93? Right? They're like, oh, I only got 90. I need all the rest of the 10. Right?
Yeah.
So something's gonna happen,
There's
right? Like, this is a potential, this on the flip side, the negatives, it potentially could lead to a war, right? Right. I just think for the average person, just take note, just listen, watch the news, right? Watch the internet, right? Like for example, there's a really good website I listen to a lot called Democracy Now, right?
Okay.
Right. And the reason I listen to them is that they're independent. They're not owned by any of the major corporations, some corporate entities, right? So they're not Fox, they're not CNN, they're not ABC, they're not NBC, they're not CBS. They're independent, but they try to give you a world view, right? Which is a balanced view, right? And as against an unbiased view. The others are puppets of the governments, right?
Yeah.
They are, right? Right. And so, and if we pay attention to it, we could see there might be some cracks in the system that enable us to benefit from your perspective financially, right?
Yes, because I want to pay more attention because you said it before, and maybe I don't want to say maybe it's me being greedy, but I want to find a way to leverage what is happening to be in a better position.
Well, absolutely. And I don't consider that greedy, right? I don't consider that greedy, right? I don't see that as big. Like, even like I said last night, it's like, I think, when we talked about money and happiness, I think we can get both, right?
Yes.
I don't think one should wipe out the other, right? Right. It all depends on how you're acquiring that money, right? Right. But I don't have a problem with people saying that money is important. I don't recall ever, buying groceries with blood, right? So I've always had to pay for it, right? So if I don't pay for it, they may kick me out of the store, right? So it kind of helps, right, if I have it, right?
Yeah, that's true. Very true. There's no lies with that.
Right. So we need it. I don't see anything wrong with it.
It's a great tool.
It's just it provides options, right? And so there's nothing wrong with it. It's just it depends on what you're using it for and how you're getting it. Yeah, yes. Are you getting it from from what kind of means are you using to get it, right? Right. So you know what I mean. And I don't think because you're getting it means you're automatically using negative means. Right. It's like, I don't think because a guy's rich, he's automatically, he's evil. I don't follow that mindset. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's funny. I heard a different opinion about that. But that's a different story and all that good stuff. Like wealthy people, like just how they accumulate their money. Sometimes it's not as ethical as others.
And I'm not disputing that some fall into that line. I just don't think, I think it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Not all. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely,
I think for us as a people, we have been conditioned to think that, it's evil. Oh my God. Right. But everybody comes after us to get their money. Like, am I crazy? Okay, Africa is the mother of the earth. Most of the minerals in the world are in Africa. Okay, now, right? So, but most of the wealth in the world is not in Africa. right? Does that make sense? That the
Ain't
guys who
that
have the
something?
most stuff are, so they're all they're doing is being suckers. Like,
Golly.
that's, you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm saying, look,
Mhm.
the guy with the minerals shouldn't get rich. That's my argument, right?
Absolutely.
Right? It's like, so that's all I'm saying. Like, why should
Yeah.
the guy with the cocoa should be the one making chocolate? That's all I'm saying, right? Right?
Chocolate.
That's
Oh, you
right,
should have said chocolate. I haven't had
right.
chocolate tea in a while.
But you
Golly.
know what I'm saying, right? That's
Yes.
all I'm saying. Is that,
Yes.
right? Like, all the raw materials, everybody goes to Africa because Africa, in my opinion, is the mother of the earth. They have all the raw materials. Africans have to figure out ways that how they can use their raw materials to benefit them, right?
Absolutely.
I always say it's not like it's always it's people always say, well, you need to be, it's about how you create what you create, right? The things is it's not about, people always say it's about resources. I say no. I'm not saying they're not important.
Correct.
All I'm saying is that if you're resourceful, then you can really understand how to use your resources, right?
That is very, very true.
Right? A
Golly.
lot of the problems that we have in the Black community, we're not as resourceful as we probably should be, right? Right. So it's
But
like, right, like,
we're getting a little better.
we're getting better. No,
We're getting
we're
better.
getting better, right? We're getting better. And I think with the advent of people like yourself,
Yeah.
a lot of people are going to get better, right? Right. Seriously, because we need to talk about it openly and honestly, right? That's all I'm saying. That's all I was really,
Yes.
indicating
That's
last night.
actually,
It's not, right?
that is
That's why,
one other thing that you said, and I obviously agree, because that's
right?
why we have this platform, right?
Right. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it openly and honestly, right? It's like I said, look, you know, it's like I said, when I think I alluded to this last night. It's like, we have a lot of churches where the pastor's a rich guy in the joint and everybody else is poor. To me, that doesn't make sense, right? 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 I think to me, that's a problem, right? I'm not saying he shouldn't get rich, but I'm saying if he's already rich, he should be able to teach those people. Why is he not teaching them to get rich?
Exactly. Why not teach
Right?
the masses
Right?
what to
Like,
do and stuff?
yeah, right? And like I know people who are pastors personally,
Yeah.
right? And I know how they think. I know how
Yeah.
they think, right? Based on how they've been taught. And a lot of them have been taught that the game is about them. And the people are basically pigeons, right? They're still pigeons. They're pawns in the game. That's
I
how
was
they've
gonna
been
say
taught.
pawns. I was gonna think pawns, but you said
Right? They are, right? I'm just saying, like, right? I've met
oh
some
my
of these
god.
guys. I've talked to them personally,
Yeah.
right?
And
I
how
know
they
how
think.
I understand. I've learned how they think, right?
Golly.
And they set up a game where it's about them, right?
Mhm.
Right,
And
right.
ugh,
And the other people are just there.
that's
They're just props, right? They're just props. They just don't realize it, right? Right. Like he's telling you, look, you're gonna get your goods when you die. Okay, well, that's great. Why aren't you doing it? Right, right. So you're getting your goods while you're alive. I'm gonna get mine when I'm dead. I'm sorry, you've lost me, right?
why can't we both get it at the same time, right?
That's all I'm saying. Right?
Indeed.
Right? Like I've never met a guy who's alive who knows anything about death. I've never met anybody like that. Right? That's just my take on it. So don't tell me that I'm gonna get my prompts when I die. But you're not waiting, right? Right? So what's wrong with
This
this
can
picture?
go a different way, but
I'm just saying, and I know I'm probably gonna ruffle some feathers, right? And like, right, the
I'm
chickens are
sorry
flying all
to
over
the
the coop,
church photos, not photos, sorry, church
right?
followers and all
Well,
that
I'm not
stuff.
sorry, I'm not sorry about what I said, but I'm just saying, look, right? Right? I'm not apologizing. I'm unapologetic about what I just said. Right?
You never
But
have to apologize for things you say.
right? I'm just saying, look, I don't think it's something that warrants an apology. I think it warrants a rational discussion.
And to have you're right, to have a
Right?
discussion how it could
Right?
how we can get better
I'm
and
not.
all that.
I don't think we should be scared of the conversation. That's all I'm saying, right? And we tend to
Okay.
put it as, oh my God, you're on this pedestal, and I'm not. I'm saying, look, okay, if I stand up on a chair, I can be on a pedestal too, right? So hey, why should you be the only guy benefiting, and I'm here duking it out, right? Right? This doesn't add up, right?
I love it. I love it, Colin.
I'm just saying, look, I'm saying if we're going to have a fair and honest discussion, then we need to have a fair and honest discussion, right?
That is true. Is it how
Right?
how can the folks find you so they're able
Right?
to have a great discussion with you
Well, you
offline
know
and all
what?
that good stuff?
Okay, here's the deal.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, I got my IG page up, right? So
Mm-hmm. And
it's
I'm gonna put it in the show notes. Indeed,
put it in
indeed.
the show. It actually I got it's Jobe Colin, right?
Okay.
So my last name's reversed in my first name. Don't ask me why
Look
I've done
at
that, but
this.
I've done that. But right,
Hey.
and if here's the thing, and here's what I would ask of them. If they
Mhm.
have any ideas that they want me to talk about,
Okay.
drop them, right?
Got it.
Because I in my world, no topic is
Mhm.
off limits, right? In fact, I
Indeed,
love
indeed.
taboo topics, right? But
Mhm.
right, and so, but yeah,
Yeah.
so if they want to do it, or they can reach out to me by email. I can drop my email as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Drop the email and then I'll be able to put that
yeah,
as
it's and the
well.
email is like my name, Colin. It's
Got it.
collinsedge@gmail.com,
I
right?
just remembered because I have it, so
Right.
I
So yeah,
will
they
be
can
able to.
if you can drop that, that'll be great. And yeah, I'm working. I'm behind schedule. I actually was planning on doing it like a couple months early, but things happened. But it's
Mhm.
on. That's
Mhm.
part of the reason I came out last night. It's like I'm forcing myself. You know what?
You
Just
gotta
do it.
force. You know
Just do
what?
it.
I learned that the only way things will be able to happen is if taking action. Thank you, Dr.
Exactly.
Vibe. And also being out there and be able to network. And I've been doing a lot of that. Like I think a lot of my close friends will be like, I see that you're going
Well,
out.
it's look, it networking works, right? I mean, I can tell you from the past.
Mhm.
I used to go even when I did my show in the past. I used to go to an event called First Fridays, right?
Yes,
And
yes, 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 yes. I've been
I
there
used to go religiously to that.
every
And
Friday or every
yeah,
first
right.
Friday, obviously.
Yeah. And a lot of my guests were met through there, right? I would meet them. There's at least, if you go in a room and there's 100 people, I guarantee there's at least 2 interesting people in a room. And I'm
Yeah,
just talking two. There's probably more like 30, right?
not just
Right.
two.
Right. I'm just saying, I'm being very conservative here, right?
Yes.
Right. Like
Oh
last night we
man.
had a room of just a few people, but guess what? Every
Mhm.
single person was interested. Right. We had a lot of
You're
content in that room last night. We had a lot of content in that room last night.
you're right.
Right. I
You're
mean, look at the content we
absolutely right.
made just from us.
Yes, it
Right. So there's a lot of content. I thought about it this morning. It's like, wait a minute. Wow. That was really a really powerful event last night because there's a
very
lot of
powerful.
interesting people, like yourself, right? A lot of really interesting people in our room. So I was
Mhm.
glad, no regrets that I went to it. And
No regrets at all.
yeah,
Same, likewise and stuff. And I honestly, I know we could go on for hours, and I know these folks are gonna be like, Cam, what the heck? I'm like, no, you need to
yeah,
hear
yeah,
this, okay? I don't
right,
care.
yeah,
It's my
yeah. Well, so
podcast. I can do whatever I want.
exactly. Go for it.
And I just want to tell the folks, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. And this
Absolutely.
is this is conversations we need to hear and be able to be comfortable and find ways to have the discussion. So Colin, I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, thank you. I
I'm
appreciate you having
glad
me.
I met
I
you.
appreciate you having me. I'm like, I was thinking about it. It's funny, and let's do it again in the future, right? I
Absolutely.
want to have you on,
Oh,
and we need to
shucks.
connect, right? We need to connect. More of us need to connect, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm thinking, I was there. I woke up this morning. I'm thinking, oh my god, I'm going to be in a podcast today. Like, really, right? Because yesterday morning when I woke up, I wasn't even thinking that, right?
Yeah.
and and it's like,
And
okay,
that's how the universe works, right?
things can happen fast, right? And like the discussion I had tonight about BRICS, and it wasn't to scare people, right? It was more to
Correct.
inform them, right? Look,
Absolutely.
you know, yeah, will there be a transition at some point? Yes, but the thing about it is, how do you position yourself in that transition, right? Right, and things that they're good, like everything else, they're going to be highs and they're going to be lows. But if you position
Mm-hmm.
yourself right, you could benefit from those highs and lows, right? So and that's where you come in, right?
Yes, yeah. I'm so honored, sir. As there, I think that was the best advice that you could give someone and all that stuff. So folks, we are going to wrap up because I know someone's gonna be cussing me later on, but it's okay. at
okay.
least
It's okay.
you learned something and all
Well,
that
I hope
good
they did. I
stuff.
hope they did. I hope they did.
No, they absolutely, because I've myself have learned so much. So I really appreciate you.
No problem. My pleasure.
Like it was an honor for you to be able to just teach about this
Well,
stuff.
thanks for having me. Thanks for
My
having me.
gosh, no problem. And I don't want to struggle like I did last week. And I am just a little bit, but it's okay because I'm going to fix it.
You're gonna get better.
Boom.
You're gonna.
I'm going to get better.
It's a
and
process. It's a
It's a process. And I'm going to switch this thing next week. Folks, you are going to see a different program. I guaranteed. It's just it's still the Mercury retrograde happening, the posts. I'm just trying to figure out what is the best way to do this. And there we go, because I know. But it's okay. We got this. We got this. I got it. It is perfectly fine. And all of that good stuff. I'm just going to do it like this. Boom.
Financial literacy, knowledge is a must. So link the flip boss, watch the result flash, and watch your life change and feel a better cause. You have a business or a plan and want to make it. Yeah, flip and floss, are the one to manifest it. Yeah, and if you want to better manage all your credit, call the boss. Flip and floss, no doubt, then we do it. Yeah, flip and floss, money literacy boss. Yeah, greatness in our blood because we're working for your cause. Flip and floss, money literacy boss. Yeah, boots up your knowledge for your minimal cost. Hey, yeah, flip and floss, money literacy boss. Greatness in our blood because we're working for your cause. Flip and floss, money literacy boss. Yeah, up your knowledge for your minimal cost.